Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum dear students. I am your English instructor and welcome to my English coaching class. Currently we are at unit number 14, Human Rights. Let's begin lecture number 1. The competency that we are targeting through this lecture is vocabulary and grammar. And our today's topic is direct and indirect. Before jumping onto the topic, let us have a look at the SLO first. Change tense in indirect speech, present, past, and perfect tenses, future, models, time and questions, orders, requests, suggestions, and advice in speech and writing. So, what does the SLO tell us? It tells us how to change direct speech into indirect speech in different tenses or in different type of sentences. Since we have already learnt about present, past and future tenses, now we will see how we change those kind of sentences in which modal verbs are used or in which orders are given or in which suggestions are used. This is the vertical linkage. Before jumping onto the topic, let's have a quick brainstorming session. Do you remember that in indirect speech, the object is changed with the subject? Can you recall this? How do we change a subject or object in indirect speech? Let's learn about these: direct and indirect narration. As I have already told you that we have already learnt about present, past and future tenses, now we will learn how we change modal verbs in indirect speech. What are modal verbs? Modal verbs are auxiliary verbs that are used to express any kind of emotion or necessity. For example, can, should or must. Let's see how do we change these words when they are being used in direct speech into indirect. Modals. In indirect speech, modal verbs are usually changed based on the context and the reporting verb. Here are some examples. Direct speech. She said, I can help you. You can clearly see that in this example, the modal verb can is being used. How do we change that? While changing it into indirect speech, we use could in place of can. So, here you see in indirect speech, she said that she could help me. So, can is now being changed into could. Let's have a look at another example. He said, you must study. In this sentence, must is the modal verb. Now let's analyze how do we change must in indirect speech. Here is the example. He told me that I had to study. Here you can see must is being changed into had to. Here you can see must is being changed into had to. So, there are some kind of sentences where we use time expressions. Let's learn how do we change time expressions while converting direct sentences into indirect sentences. The first one is, she said, I will come tomorrow. Here, time is being mentioned. What did she say? I will come tomorrow. How do we change this time expression? Tomorrow is being changed into the next day or the following day. See, she said that she would come the next day, or you can also use following day. Let's have a look at another example. He said, we met last week. In indirect speech, last week or the word last is being changed into previous. So look, he mentioned that they had met the previous week. They had met the previous week. Let's see how do we change questions while converting direct sentences into indirect statements. She said, "Are you coming?" While converting direct sentences into indirect sentences and the sentences that are interrogative, we use asked. We use asked and we replace the inverted commas with if. Let's see. She asked if I was coming. Another example is, he said, "What is your name?" And in indirect speech, it is like, he asked what my name was. Is that clear? Now see, how do we change those sentences in which orders are being given? Direct commands become indirect requests or suggestions. For example, she said, "Close the door." So, what did we learn? We learned that in those sentences in which orders are given, those orders are being converted into requests. So, what is this sentence? She said, "Close the door" or "close the window." It will now change into indirect speech and it will become a request. How? She requested that I close the door. Or, he said, "Do your homework." He told me to do my homework. It is quite apparent that in indirect sentence, those orders are now converted into requests. Now, if we already have requests in our direct sentences, what do we do? See the example. She said, "Please lend me your book." Please lend me your book. Let's see how does it change into indirect speech. In indirect speech, it is, she said if I could lend her my book. Because while changing those sentences in which there is a request, that request becomes more polite and more congenial. "Could you help me?" he said. In indirect speech, we will say, he asked if I could help him. Now let's see what do we do while we change the sentences in which suggestions or advices are being used in direct speech while converting into indirect speech. She said to him, "You should take a break." In indirect speech, we will say, she suggested him to take a break. Similarly, he said, "Why don't you try a different way?" And in indirect speech, it is, he advised me to consider a different way. So this is how we change different kind of direct sentences into indirect sentences. This is your classroom activity. Change the given direct speech into indirect speech. Since you have already learnt about all the rules of changing direct speech into indirect speech, let's move on to this classroom activity and change the direct sentences into indirect sentences. The first one is, he said, "I can swim." So, it will be like that. He said that he could swim. Since can is the modal verb, can is the modal verb, and what is its rule of changing? Can is being changed into could. He said that he could swim. The next one is, they said, "We saw him yesterday." While changing it into indirect speech, we will say, they said that they had seen him the previous day. Since you already know that present indefinite tense is being changed into present perfect tense, and according to time expressions, the word yesterday is being changed into the previous day. This is your homework. Write 10 direct speech sentences in your notebook using model, advice, suggestion, request, etc. and change them into indirect speech. We have also provided a simulation for your further and comprehensive understanding. The worksheet is also being attached, and apart from all these, you will have access to the skill sheet, the question bank and the lesson plan of this lecture. Thank you so much.